Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now here's your host, Roxanne Derhodge.
Hi everyone, it's Roxanne Derhodge of Authentic Living with Roxanne. Thanks for tuning in again. This week I have a colleague, Jackie Faulkner, and Jackie is the president and co-founder of Strive State Inc. Hi Jackie, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing well, thanks to Roxanne.
So Jackie and I we were privileged to sit on a roundtable on inclusivity and diversity that was through Canada Life, and I'm going to forget the mental health services through Canada Life. And that was probably, we're going back about 2 months ago. So, right, Jackie?
Yeah, September.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's September. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about Jackie's background, and she brings a lot of expertise in the field of mental health. Her firm is a management consulting company, and it has a vision to create a world in which everyone loves Mondays. Wow, I like that. Because I know most people are kind of dragging and trying to figure out Mondays. She's got over 15 years of leadership experience in community and mental health care. And she has a passion for investing in employee mental health and ultimately strategies for businesses to flourish. She's insightful. She's a diplomatic leader with expertise in developing organizational culture and performance management. And she's also a skilled facilitator and mediator. So Jackie, is there anything that I missed in the bio that you'd like to kind of share with the listeners?
Well, I don't think so. That probably covers all the highlights. Having worked in the field of mental health and community services for a number of years is certainly where I developed my passion for employee mental health, which is really what propelled me towards launching Thrive State to focus in and with the goal of helping more businesses improve mental health for their employees.
So tell me, what did you always want to kind of help people with mental health problems? How did you kind of take this path to kind of end up working with mental health?
Yeah, that's a great question. So no, not always. I think it was sort of a journey that involved, seeing people close to me, family members, and colleagues, close friends struggling with mental health issues in their own way. And when you have a personal relationship with somebody that you don't work with and that you see them struggling and recognizing how work is impacting them, I had sort of those feelings of wanting to advocate on their behalf when they're struggling. And then as an employee and manager for a number of years in the mental health sector specifically, we're always, the conversation is always about the clients. And then as I realized working with staff that a lot of staff, would identify as having lived experience with mental health as well. So, really for me, it was just, we have to change the conversation. It's not just about clients. It is about staff, and these staff are they're not my loved ones necessarily, but they could be, because this exists in my personal life too. So I think it was sort of a culmination of all of that led me to really want to make a difference.
And so true, right? Like obviously with my background as a psychotherapist, people come to us because they need assistance, but we're also using our mental faculties to assist. So obviously, like you said, you've worked with people with actually lived experience, which is a fantastic thing, that they can go out and help and kind of assist from that space of having been through something, depression, anxiety, those types of things. And, I often say that, when I worked for Metro Toronto Police, for instance, the things that I would see in any given shift, Jackie, still I can remember today, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm talking 25 years later.
Right.
And so of course, yes, as the employee also, you recognize, having been frontline, and then obviously going on to different management situations and consulting situations, we all have mental well-being on our minds, right? Because gone are the days where we're using our limbs anymore, and we're more in a knowledge economy today.
Right.
And we're needing to kind of make sure that we protect, what I often used to describe to my son as the thing attached to your neck is really, really very important. So let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing out there. So let's talk about kind of psychological health and safety, because I know that's the bucket of the work that you do with companies. So what are you seeing out there with companies? Are you finding that people are a lot more knowledgeable, or do you think that people are still kind of reacting to crises to implement strategy?
Yeah, so I would say for the most part so far, a lot of times when we're getting called in, it is because there's, a very particular situation, not necessarily crisis, but a significant situation that's affecting employees that the owners or management are recognizing we need some external help here. What we find though when we go in is, of course, there is the situation that needs our help, to help identify, what's going on, what's the solution, how did it get to this point. We do what we often recommend is to use the Guarding Minds at Work survey tool to establish a baseline with organizations, because it's really easy when you're in that sort of crisis or problem mode to forget about all the things that you are already also doing well. So we like to also, it's not like businesses are doing everything terribly as it relates to employee mental health. They're inevitably doing some of the things really well. So we want to, while we're helping them with the issues, also want to support them in leveraging the things that they're doing well, so that it's not just a bad news kind of story. And the good news is there often is a lot of things, businesses doing really creative things or very authentic things. I know you're, into that, but, owners, particularly in small businesses who really care and have the type of relationship with employees where, they're helping them in the evenings or weekends with, repairing something at their house, or, they really have those relationships that are meaningful. And then, there's a situation that's happening at work in one particular area where it's an issue.
So let's talk. So obviously, Guarding Minds at Work, many people will not know what that is. So tell us a little bit about that. Obviously, at the time that program, I think, got started, I was with Morneau Chappelle at that time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because they participated in the research.
Correct. So it was started with Great West Life, and they did put this together. So share a little bit more about it, because if employers are listening or leaders are listening, I'm going to assume that they're going to go, okay, well, maybe that's something I should check out, because if I can kind of get a baseline, why not be able to, and what we can do is have you provide the link so that we can put it in with the podcast.
Sure.
Also.
Yes, I'd love to. So it's actually a free resource that was created, like you just mentioned. There was many organizations, including Morneau Chappelle, Mental Health Commission of Canada, and I'm going to forget all of them, unfortunately, but basically they, did some research and established the national standard for psychological health and safety. Guarding Minds at Work is a tool. There's a tool with several resources that are free to any Canadian business, and I don't know, possibly outside of Canada, I'm not sure. And it's a way to, if depending on the size of the organization and how in-depth you want to go, there's different levels of the tool that you can choose. You could do a quick sort of 6-question organizational overview, or you can do a more in-depth, I think it's 66 questions. You have all staff complete it, and then it provides you a score across the 13 psychosocial factors that affect psychological health and safety in the workplace. So things like, clear leadership, things like reward and recognition, the amount of influence employees have on their work, work-life balance. There's 13 categories, so organizations will be able to see how they score, and they'll also be able to see how they score against a standardized national average. So I think it's over 1,000 other Canadian organizations. So they'll be able to see where they're doing well and where they need to pay attention, where they're, maybe there's minimal risk, just need to do some tweaking, and maybe areas of serious concern where they really need to create a more robust strategy to improve that area.
So a great resource to start, to kind of look, like you said, sometimes you get called in because there's an issue. Maybe there's more conflicts potentially, or maybe they're having problems with, maybe conflict with managers or arbitrations or whatever. Or maybe their sick pay is on the rise, or their short-term disability, is coming up for renewal, and it's going up by that 20% that every employer freaks out about.
Yes. Yep.
There could be, or potentially a crisis, right? Something's happened, they've never had to deal with it before, and they don't know what to do. So when you go in, you might tell them to start with guarding minds, for instance, or suggest that. Then what are the steps that you obviously you're going in and asking very strategic questions about how the issue is impacting them. And then what other steps are you taking as a management consultation?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit on the organization structure and size. Certainly we're going to spend time, interviewing senior leaders in the organization, either one-on-one or in a group, depending how many. And then we also want to spend time with who the leadership identifies as like key employees. So whether it's people who are being really impacted by the issue. So like you said, if it is, a significant conflict that's coming up, or if it's an increase in absenteeism or turnover, we're going to look at their HR data, whatever they have collected. So whether it's, exit survey information, what is the sick time usage, their turnover rates, their STD, LTD usage rates. So we kind of review their HR data. We'll usually do a focus group with staff to kind of validate qualitatively the quantitative aspects of the Guarding Minds survey. And then from there, once we sort of have that story picture of what's really going on, we take that information and see, where are the greatest risk areas and the 13 factors that, really need immediate attention. And we're going to make recommendations for those. And also where are the, low-hanging fruit, the things that are the quick wins that can help potentially improve morale in a faster sort of way. So it really depends on what is the issue. Certainly we've ended up doing, mediation sessions between employees, or team building facilitation. Sometimes it's something like offering, Myers-Briggs workshop, just helping employees understand the personality differences. And it's not that someone is right or wrong, or, better than the other, but just putting a framework around how each person is, so that they can leverage the strengths instead of being focused on the differences. And then, often our work is sort of ongoing. So once we've, we don't just like to go in and write a report and then leave. We had organizations where sometimes if one of the issues is around sort of lack of clarity and expectations, because that inevitably causes interpersonal conflict and stress at work. So, we might be helping organizations to, fine tune, or sometimes create for the first time policies and procedures that didn't exist, or job descriptions, or even an organizational structure, because they might not have, certainly in smaller businesses where they've grown sort of organically over time, they're missing some of those key infrastructure pieces. So they just need someone from the outside to come in and help them kind of map it out in a more clear way that then, helps their employees understand the picture of the place that they work.
So you're already taking an overall pulse then, right? So you're looking at from a strategic perspective, you're looking at the macro and how the issue fits, and you're mapping out what the needs are and how to address it. So whether it's a mediation, I've done over my career a lot of mediation, and I can think of one particular case, and it was a long-standing issue, and it was a mental health concern.
Right.
And it continued, I think, for almost 10 years. And so when I was called in to kind of, deal with the situation, they were, remiss to believe that there was any possibility that there would be change. Let's put it that way. But really, at the end of the day, and it probably took about 15 hours to be able to mediate it and come to solution. But really, it was someone that obviously was having a mental health concern, had been off on short term, came back, and I would say the return to work strategy was ineffective, and then the conflict continued to
so it wasn't
perpetuate.
Right.
And then really to get these two people in the room was, there was no, they agreed to be in the room, but you could feel the tension, right? Because they really had gotten to the point where they just didn't like each other.
Right.
And, by naturally kind of looking at, getting to know them, and obviously, as a mediator, you have to really get to know the person and have them feel comfortable, and then to get them both in the same room. And really at the end of the day, it was a lot of assumptions that was made. And this person was struggling with mental health, and there was a age category, like a differential, kind of age and stage. So the one perceived the other is not wanting to work to the potential, but not recognizing that the other person was in fact had an anxiety disorder. And really with time, what this employee shared openly, with time, once she felt comfortable, kind of what she was going through. And then the manager was like, she was so horrified that she even perceived it as being her not wanting to follow through.
Right.
So it's that bridge, right? That's, can end up being such a neutralizing element where it's two basically good people, but they've been locked in these positions for so long. And obviously the person was about to go off on short term again.
Right. Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, Roxanne, because the process that I use, it's called Transformational Team Building, and it is meant to happen over 2 kind of full days. So, it is anywhere from 14 to 16 hours, and it could be 2, but it could also be 12 people sort of involved in a team. Conflict isn't always just about 2 people, and even when it is, there's the people around them who then are impacted by that conflict. And so, if there's whatever, usually when I do that type of work, what inevitably unfolds is that at some point back in time, assumptions were made, and then they carry forward. So, people, didn't take the time to have, a little bit of an awkward or difficult conversation to check that the assumption. They just continue to see that person through the lens of, they're lazy, or, they're not working up to their potential. So then we do that, right? It's just our natural tendency. We seek to reinforce what we already believe. And then it accumulates over time, and it just turns into this really muddy, yucky mess. And, when we get people to that point of being able to have those really open, it's vulnerable. It's absolutely can be scary to have that conversation. Because, at the end of the day, people usually care about other people,
Yes.
and once they realize, oh, you're actually struggling, or, oh, you didn't mean what you said that way, all of this stuff kind of melts away, and they realize, oh, there are things I could like about you. There, you do have some strengths, and they're able to see it from a different perspective. It's a really beautiful thing to watch, actually.
It is, and management and did not believe that it was possible. That's the thing, because and I think I like the approach that you take to have in isolation. Like, we weren't invited in to become strategic. We were just asked to come in and do the mediation. But in retrospect, like to your point, these individuals go back and they have teams, or let's say it's a leadership team or a peer team, or maybe they work on different projects together, the impact has cross-pollinated within each pocket that they work in within that environment.
Exactly.
So tell me what kind of training you would do, like let's say you're dealing with something like that, the transformational element of the 2 days, what kind of things would you cover in that?
So that the 2 days is actually, the whole thing is focused on creating a safe space for me to facilitate safe conversations, to kind of clear the air. And it just actually takes that long. You know, it takes people a bit of time to feel safe initially. We kind of spend the first half of the first day just, you know, creating some boundaries and rules around how we're going to engage in this conversation. And then the rest of the first day, because I've before the meeting together, I do one-on-one interviews with everybody. So I have kind of a sense of what are the issues in the room. And then they spend the day possibly with some prompting from me, you know, about what's going on. And then I help them it's really just having conversations that they haven't had, that they've needed to have. And then the benefit of doing it over 2 days, because what happens is, you know, you only have half a day and there's more that needs to be talked about than you can cover in that afternoon. And people, you know, they go home, they sleep on it, they're stressed, they realize, oh, you know, there is this thing, and they kind of come back the next morning ready to, okay, like, you know, we're in it now. I want to get it all out. And then by the afternoon of the second day, we've usually had some really good breakthroughs where people are realizing they start to see the good. They start to have those transformational conversations. They start to come to some agreements around how this is going to look different going forward. And, you know, it's an awesome and difficult process. So they also say, okay, we don't want to do this, have to get to this point again. So what do we need to do to like avoid this going forward? And then, you know, the last sort of little bit of the afternoon is spent making those agreements, sort of closing the space. How are we going to talk about this when we go back to work? Because although we try to get most of a team in the circle together, inevitably, like you said, people know when there's conflict, it flows out. Other people know. So then how are we going to talk about this when we do go back to work? You know, how do we maintain confidentiality and also communicate to others that we're okay now and we're in a good place and we're working together now? So we you know, help the group sort of formulate that conversation. So it's not a training that we do. It's more so creating safe space and having them practice difficult conversations.
Right, and to know that it's not okay to do certain things, right? Because I think sometimes when people get into conflict, and let's say you're walking in and you don't like me, Jackie, and you know, you kind of think, oh, I don't want to talk to her, so I'll just walk past her. Right. Something as basic as that, as good morning, even though I may have a difference. I think when you get into that transformative place where you can say, what's basic respect, and you know, how do people treat each other on this team, and you know, we could see that there's pockets or there camps. It allows that space, like you said, I could see, and then you know, to have everybody discuss it openly and know that I can say whatever I'm going to say, and it's going to be used constructively. I'm not going to walk past you again tomorrow and you know, kind of divert my eye again. I'm going to think about that to say, wow, we thought about that, and Jackie said that was something that concerned her, and we kind of decided that even if it's a nod, it's better than nothing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Recognizing the impact that we have on other people. So that person who's getting walked past would have had the chance to say how that makes them feel. And then, you know, usually when someone realizes, oh, I'm making someone, you know, feel terrible about themselves or feel not included or feel, you know, whatever, that doesn't, you know, feel nice. I don't want to make somebody feel like that. And I'm probably doing it for some reason that I'm hurt about, you know, because you didn't, you know, it's kind of this, you know, the playground mentality that just, it's our inner 6-year-olds that are showing up at work.
I have a colleague that talks about her brand is, her name is Penny Tremblay, and she talks about playing nice in the sandbox. That's her basically all to do with conflict. And it really is, right? We are truly big versions of ourselves, you know. So, you know, when you didn't get picked to play hopscotch, or you didn't get invited to the birthday party, or, you know, all those things. And we bring that emotional part of ourselves to work.
We do. Yep.
And it
Absolutely
plays through, right? And then, so I think, you know, that transformative conversation, and it's powerful. I know I've done them, you know, with teams and stuff like that. When people kind of just can be people, it's pretty powerful, like you said.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of historical residue around this idea that you're supposed to separate your personal self, your emotions when you show up to work. And I personally, I can't subscribe to that belief, because I'm a whole person, and my whole person comes with me wherever I go. And that person consists of emotions and feelings. And so what I think is probably missing in our, you know, educational system, and even probably at homes, is we don't learn from a young age how to have difficult conversations. We don't learn how to have healthy conflict. You know, conflict in itself isn't a bad thing, but people don't deal with it in a healthy way because they haven't learned how. So, you know, then it shows up at work because people are trying to be, you know, quote, professional. Meanwhile, they're, you know, by kind of stifling or suffocating their feelings, but that doesn't actually do anybody any good, in my opinion.
And I think most people believe that conflict means that it has to be a big row or quarrel, and you know, like raise voices and stuff like that. And you're right. I think we need to start to teach our little ones that you can have disagreements, but you can listen to someone else. They may not agree with you, but that's, you know, that's conflict resolution being taught right there.
Yeah.
And to talk. Yeah, just, you know, to recognize that I'm going to have differences, but it doesn't mean that I have to be polarized and then I'm just not going to play with you again, right?
Right, exactly, yeah.
Because I have to play with you again because I have to see you at work for 8 hours, for 10 years.
Yeah.
Which it gets difficult. So let's pivot a little bit and talk a little bit more about mental health in the workplace and kind of what we're seeing. Obviously, we're seeing such a rise, you know, with, you know, anxiety, depression, lots of things like that. What kind of things are you seeing more of? Is there age bands or different sectors that you're seeing more of an issue with, or is it that we're seeing it across the board?
I don't think I could say, certainly not like from a data perspective, I wouldn't say it's higher in any one place than the other. I think overall what we're seeing is people reporting an increased sense of stress, kind of overall stress. And, you know, I think that is, you know, that's a ubiquitous issue. You know, culturally, it's in our, you know, it's just kind of this fast pace, go, focus on productivity. And so I think that, yeah, stress, it seems like everyone we talk to, wherever we're going, whether it's in our kind of work capacity or not, it's, you know, people are busy and or stressed. That's, you know, how are you doing? I'm busy or I'm stressed. That's this kind of the response. And so I think, you know, the depression, anxiety, we know are the most common mood disorders. 1 in 5, I think it might even be closer to 1 in 4 now. That is, we know that that's impacting people statistically. So we know that that's showing up at work. And I think what employers don't realize is that they have a duty now. The law is shifting in such a way that employers have the duty to cause no additional harm. So if someone is experiencing, you know, it's almost like employers need to operate from the assumption that, you know, 1 in 4 to 5 of my employees have depression and or anxiety. I need to make sure that when they're coming to work, I'm not compounding those issues by having, you know, unrealistic demands or tolerating incivility or, you know, turning a blind eye to, you know, bullying or harassment, any of those things. because that's that's hard for anybody. That's difficult for 5 and 5 people, but for the person who's also struggling with depression and anxiety, you're compounding now. I don't know if I answered your question, actually.
Yeah, but it makes sense because we have a duty to keep our workplaces psychologically safe. So there is now implications for companies that are not, addressing things like harassment. Well, harassment is a given, but like, whether it's bullying or, not, if there's constant conflict, you need to get into it and to understand, is it just a communication problem, or is there really something else going on? So now under psychological health and safety, we need to make our environment safe for our employees to be able to go to work and know that we're not in any way being implicit and not recognizing that we're not addressing concerns.
Right. Yes. And I think so, going back to your question around is it more in one age or a category or sector than another? No, I think probably the content of what's causing stress might differ by age. The people who are on the later years of their career are have the stress of that, preparing for retirement, that life change stress, trying to figure out what's the legacy that they want to leave at work. So, they have that stress and are often at more senior level positions at the end of their career. So that comes with increased stress and responsibility. Folks in the sort of middle age and period in their career are often also dealing with that sandwich effect. So outside of work, they have aging parents and probably or possibly children at home. So they're sort of caretaking and working when they're not at work, and then they're coming to work trying to work towards their career. So they're just kind of stressed in terms of being overextended in their multiple roles in their life. And then even the folks entering the workforce for the first time, they have stress around, could be student loans, it could be living out on their own for the first time, entering the workforce. That's stressful, trying to just kind of navigate, what do I need to do? How does this work? It's a whole new world. So what is causing the stress might be different by age, but I think it is happening to everybody.
Of course. And like you said, having to, most people aren't unplugging anymore. And now we have to talk about the digital elements of things, and gone are the days where people go home and they disconnect now. A lot more people are working virtually. So there's implications for that. So I will say it's like you're putting them in the tumble cycle with not being disconnected. What we know with the brain is the brain needs quiet just to be able to, just like we need to sleep, to be able to perform our days. Our brains also need that. And with situational anxiety, and most of it is situational, right? Not per se biological anxiety and depression, but if it doesn't get addressed, then it kind of, gets stuck in the body where you're needing to then kind of, I say you need to give it a bit of a boost, right? And then we're getting into things like medication and time off, those types of things. So it does become a perpetuating cycle. So I think it's definitely something that we have to keep our eyes on, because it's going to be on the increase, and we have to start to talk about strategy from a different perspective with okay, we're not unplugging. How are we going to ensure that people are doing it? How are we going to ensure that we're going to make it so that people feel comfortable enough to take their lunches, to take their breaks, all that kind of stuff. And strategy, that you said, like from an HR perspective around things like wellness, health and wellness, what kind of services do you offer, those types of things. That's even more, when I started in the field of EAP back in 1984, it was kind of nice to have that kind of tagline, but now it's kind of a given with most companies that they have, psychological services that, people could access 24/7 kind of, that's confidential.
Right. Yeah.
So this has been very, very informative. Is there anything specific that you want to kind of share with the listeners before I let you go?
I think just you mentioned our vision at the beginning. We started this business because we want to be part of creating a world where Monday is the best day of the week. And I think that it's possible, and I think it can seem overwhelming for people when they're in the muck. I think it actually isn't as, it doesn't have to cost extra to take care of people well, to create supportive working environments. It's really just, some tweaking policies and procedures, or, reassigning workloads. There's different things that can be done. It doesn't have to be expensive. And so I guess I just want to reiterate that I think it's possible, and that the Deloitte research that came out at the beginning of November, that shows, it was a Canadian study showing that when you invest in employee mental health, the return on investment is about $1.63 for every dollar spent. I think it's the best investment you can make. People are they're your highest cost item. So I think they're worth the investment.
Awesome. And if you could send us that link to
will.
that article too,
Sure.
That would be great. We will include it. Okay. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I guess what I'm taking away, and we know this anyway, is that prevention costs less than to sicken an employee. Mm-hmm. And if you look at short-term claims and you think about what the average short-term claim is, let's say it's 2-3 months, and you look at your hourly rates and think about what it takes to replace that employee. Mm-hmm. And, if you were to use the $1.60, like the Deloitte study, to really kind of implement strategy, it may seem like you're paying for certain things up front, but really you're inoculating your environments mm-hmm. against things that need to get done anyway, because you're going to pay on the back end. And if, mm-hmm. It's expensive, short-term is expensive. But what's even more expensive is if people get into long-term, which mm-hmm. we know that with increase in anxiety and depression, if it doesn't get addressed in the proper way, what's going to happen is, unfortunately, those employees are going to get sicker and sicker, and then it's going to be harder. And those are the hard costs that employers struggle with today. Mm-hmm. So for everyone listening, thank you so much for listening in. If you're needing any information on me, it's Roxanne Durhaj. I'm a mental health and wellness specialist. I speak on authenticity in leadership in the workplace. So thanks again, Jackie, and have a great day.
Thanks, Roxanne.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannedurhaj.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.